Police arrest Black Boy at McDonald's, but discover too late that he is the commander's son. In a city marked by racial tensions, a simple snack at a McDonald's turns into an event that will change lives forever. Jamal Carter, a 16-year-old black youth, just wanted a quick meal after basketball practice. Wearing a hoodie and carrying his backpack, he becomes the target of two police officers who, based on prejudice, accuse him of theft. What they don't know is that he is the son of the police chief of Hillside. When the truth comes to light, the consequences of this fatal mistake reverberate throughout the community, challenging the morals of the police force and the relationship between father and son. Jamal Carter always dreamed of being a basketball player. He spent hours practicing, trying to improve his skills, but the reality he lived in was harsh. He faced the suspicious glances of others because of the color of his skin, even though he was a dedicated student. Jamal knew that his efforts were often overlooked, and this constant struggle to be seen as more than a stereotype weighed heavily on his young shoulders. The pressure to stand out in an environment that marginalized him was constant, especially being the son of William Carter, the police chief of the city. That afternoon, after a tiring practice, the idea of a snack at McDonald's seemed perfect. The restaurant was full of people, a common and vibrant scene that contrasted with the tensions permeating society. However, when he entered, a cloud of distrust hung over him. The gaze of one of the customers fixed in his direction, and in moments the police made their approach. Sergeant Mike Reynolds, a veteran who carried prejudices, did not hesitate to act. Jamal was handcuffed, his dream of becoming an athlete overshadowed by an injustice he could never have imagined. As the situation unfolded, Jamal's life changed drastically. He found himself amid screams and curious looks, his vulnerability exposed before a society that did not embrace him. The weight of the false accusation made him question not only others' perceptions of him, but also his father's ability to protect and defend him. As a young man who always sought approval, Jamal found himself in an emotional maze, grappling with doubt and betrayal from those who should have supported him the most. The scene at McDonald's quickly spread across social media. The video of the aggressive approach went viral, sparking protests and calls for justice. Jamal, now a symbol of a larger struggle, faced not only the pain of personal injustice, but also became part of a movement questioning systemic racism and the culture of abuse of power within the police. Thus, while Jamal struggled to understand his place in a world that seemed so hostile, his father, William, found himself in a difficult position, torn between duty and protecting his son. From that point on, both Jamal and William would have to confront their own truths and the complexity of their relationship. The incident would force them to rethink what it meant to be a leader, a father, and a black man in a society that often failed to recognize their humanity. The clash between expectations and reality would become the catalyst for a profound transformation, not only in their lives, but in the community surrounding them. The quest for redemption and justice would become the driving force that would lead them to confront not only external prejudices, but also their own fears and insecurities. The incident at McDonald's left Jamal in a state of confusion and despair. As he was taken to the police station, hands cuffed and head down, his mind spun with chaotic thoughts. What should have been a simple snack now felt like the end of his dreams. He wondered how this could happen to him, a young man who just wanted to enjoy a moment of relaxation. The injustice of that situation made him question his own identity and the place he occupied in society. The pain and anger boiled inside him. Jamal always believed he could overcome the stereotypes surrounding him, but that episode dismantled his confidence. With each passing second, he felt more isolated, more powerless. The weight of disgrace was not only on him, but also on his family. When the news of what happened reached William, the police chief, his life turned into a whirlwind of emotions. He was torn between the duty to protect his position in the police force and the urgency to defend his son. William, a man who had always prided himself on his position, now found himself at a crossroads. The pressure from colleagues and the community grew every minute. He knew that the credibility of his career was at stake, but he could not ignore the pain his son was facing. For William, this situation was a betrayal not only to Jamal but to all the values he tried to instill in his son. He wondered if he had failed as a father, if he had done enough to prepare Jamal for the hostile world they faced. Meanwhile, outside the police station, the city was boiling with protests. Jamal's friends, like David and Maya, were among the demonstrators. David, a childhood friend who always believed in Jamal's potential, felt the need to act. He knew that the injustice faced by Jamal was not an isolated case, but part of a larger pattern of discrimination. Maya, on the other hand, was a young activist who always dreamed of making a difference. She was determined to use Jamal's voice as a cry against injustice. Together, they became the front line of the fight for truth, but also faced their own challenges. The social pressure and the possibility of retaliation left them insecure, questioning whether they were ready for this battle. However, Jamal, in his state of anguish, could not see beyond his own suffering. The messages of support and solidarity arriving through social media could not penetrate the barrier of pain surrounding him. He felt like a prisoner, not just physically, but emotionally. The image of his father, a respected man, being questioned about his own position, left him even more confused. Jamal wondered if he could trust William, if he would truly protect him, or if, at some point, his loyalty to the police would fail in defense of his son. The tensions grew every day. The support Jamal received from the community was undeniable, but the pressure on William to maintain order and protect the image of the police was increasing. He felt suffocated, unable to make a clear decision. The family dynamics began to deteriorate, and the silences between father and son became heavier. Jamal felt betrayed by William, questioning whether he really understood the struggle they faced. The first major challenge for Jamal came when he was called to testify about the incident. He felt a chill in his stomach as he prepared to tell his version of the events. The fear of not being believed, of being discredited again because of his color and appearance, consumed him. Jamal knew he needed to find courage within himself, but doubt paralyzed him. He remembered the lessons his father had always taught him about the importance of truth and justice, but now those words seemed empty. In the courtroom, while waiting for his moment to speak, Jamal saw the inquisitive looks of those present. The cameras were on, and the pressure from the public weighed on his shoulders. He felt small, but at the same time, a flame of determination began to rise. He was not just fighting for himself, but for all those who had suffered unjustly. The voice that had once trembled was now becoming more firm. Deep down, he knew he needed to stand up, not just for his truth, but for all the voices that had no space to be heard. Jamal's journey was just beginning, and he saw himself on a path full of challenges. But at the same time, it was a path that would lead him to discover his true strength and the importance of uniting with those who fought by his side. The fight for justice would become not only a personal battle, but a movement that could transform the city and, who knows, maybe even the world. Jamal was sitting in the waiting room of the courthouse, anxiety pulsing in his chest like a drum. He tried to concentrate, but his thoughts were a whirlwind. The sight of the judge, with his robe and impassive expression, seemed like a looming shadow. The weight of responsibility was crushing. It was not just his truth at stake, but the struggle of many who, like him, faced daily injustices. He remembered his father's words about the importance of fighting for what was right, but doubt was beginning to erode that belief. What if he failed? What if his voice was not heard? Outside, the pressure was mounting. David and Maya were among the crowd of protesters gathering in support of Jamal. They held signs and shouted slogans, but at the same time, they felt the tension in the air. David was worried. He knew the situation could escalate at any moment. The activism that had started as an act of solidarity was now becoming a risk. He looked at Maya, realizing that her determination was not only admirable, but also dangerous. They had to act, but the uncertainty about what to do was becoming increasingly unclear. Inside the courthouse, when it was finally his turn to testify, Jamal stood up, feeling the gaze of the public upon him. He took a deep breath and began to speak. His voice trembled at first, but as he recounted his version of the events, he felt a bit of courage welling up. But as he progressed, the defense's questions began to arise. They were pointed and challenging. Jamal found himself being questioned about his actions, his intentions, and each question felt like a blow. He could feel the pressure increasing, the walls seeming to close in around him. With each answer, doubt resurfaced. Was he being understood? Would the juror see the truth in his words? Insecurity transformed into a chill in his stomach, and he hesitated. The heavy silence in the room seemed to scream that he needed to be perfect. If he failed, all the support he had received could fade away, and the fight for justice would become a futile struggle. His father's gaze, who was there, made him feel the guilt even more intensely. William wanted so much to believe in his son, but the pressure of his position in the police made him feel divided. Before we continue with this gripping story, take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories. And let us know which city you are watching this video from in the comments. In the courtroom, the defense presented new evidence that Jamal did not expect. A video of the incident, which showed a distorted version of what really happened. The image of him, handcuffed and surrounded by police, seemed to incriminate his innocence. The voices of the crowd outside, which had once been supportive, now became a distant echo. Jamal felt as if he were sinking. He had to find a way to turn that situation around, but with each passing minute, his confidence drained away. David, outside the courthouse, sensed the rising tension and decided he needed to act. He began to organize a new protest, this time calling for a deeper investigation into police conduct. He felt that Jamal needed more than moral support. He needed a concrete response, an action that showed that the community stood by his side. Maya, in turn, began using her social media to amplify Jamal's voice, trying to create a wave of support that could not be ignored. But the pressure was affecting both of them. David faced criticism from friends who didn't understand why he was taking such risks. Maya, for her part, felt anxiety grow with each negative message she received. Meanwhile, at the police station, the situation was becoming untenable. Jamal was hearing rumors about reprisals against him and his friends. The idea that his actions could bring danger not only to himself, but to those who cared about him, consumed him. He wondered if he was ready to bear that burden. What had once seemed a fight for justice now felt like a lonely battle. The conflict between father and son was also intensifying. William, struggling to balance his role as police chief and father, was growing distant from Jamal. He feared the consequences that a scandal could bring to his career and family. The tension between them became palpable, and conversations that had once been open were now filled with uncomfortable silences. Jamal felt betrayed and misunderstood, while William felt trapped in a cycle of guilt and responsibility. In court, at the end of his testimony, Jamal looked at the audience and saw the faces of his friends, hope shining in their eyes. He realized that, even amid pain and uncertainty, he was not alone. The fight for the truth was not just his, it was a call for everyone. With this new perspective, he remembered the lessons he had learned about resilience and courage. And even if things didn't go as he hoped, he was determined not to let fear paralyze him. The journey for justice would continue, along with the search for his own identity and strength. Jamal was about to conclude his testimony when an unexpected event interrupted the flow of the hearing. The courtroom door burst open, and a woman hurried in, holding a brown envelope in her hands. The murmurs in the seats increased, and all eyes turned to her. It was a local reporter who had been covering Jamal's story from the beginning, known for her in-depth investigations and her fearlessness in exposing the truth. She approached the judge and, with an expression of urgency, requested permission to speak. The judge hesitated, but the gravity in the woman's tone seemed to convince him. He nodded, and the reporter turned to the room, Jamal's heart racing. What she had to say could change everything. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," she began, her voice steady, "I have found new evidence that may be crucial to Jamal's case." The noise in the room faded, and everyone waited anxiously. After reviewing security footage from a nearby store at the time of the incident, I realized there is a recording showing the police acting inappropriately before Jamal was arrested. Jamal felt his stomach churn. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. The woman continued, revealing that the video showed the police assaulting a friend of Jamal's before he intervened. This sheds new light on his actions. Jamal was not just trying to defend himself, he was trying to protect someone who was being attacked. The room fell into absolute silence. The revelations sparked a wave of murmurs among the spectators. Jamal felt hope begin to bloom in his chest again, but at the same time, a new concern arose. He knew that this new evidence could not only change the course of his case, but also bring to light a host of issues regarding police conduct. Would he be able to handle the repercussions of this? The reporter handed the video to the judge, and the room prepared to watch it. Jamal felt a mix of anxiety and hope. He knew that the truth might finally be revealed, but he also feared what it could mean for his life and the lives of others. The video started to play, and the scene unfolded before his eyes. He saw his friend being assaulted, and the image hit him like a punch to the stomach. When the video ended, the atmosphere in the room had changed drastically. The judge's expression had shifted, and the jurors looked confused. The defense was in disarray, and Jamal sensed that the tide might be turning in his favor. But in the back of his mind, a doubt persisted. He remembered his father's words and the pressure he felt not only to win the battle, but to do so the right way. What if this victory meant exposing police corruption and creating an even greater conflict in his community? At the end of the hearing, as everyone dispersed, Jamal felt overwhelmed. He had prepared to be the protagonist of his own story, but now he found himself at the center of a much larger conflict. He needed to decide if he was willing to fight against the system that had oppressed him, even if it meant confronting the truth about what had happened in his own life and the mistakes he might have made. At home, beside his father, the conversation was tense. William was conflicted, torn between his role as a police officer and his responsibility as a father. "Jamal, you need to understand that exposing this could have serious consequences. People will look at you differently," he said, his voice trembling. Jamal, for his part, felt that he finally had the chance to be heard, and that possibility pulled at him strongly. "I just want the truth, Dad. I can't stay silent knowing I did what was right. I can't let this happen to anyone else," Jamal replied, emotion overflowing. He realized that his struggle was not just about him, but about everyone facing injustice. The tension between them escalated, and Jamal felt trapped between the desire to move forward and the need to protect his family. He was at a turning point. The revelation of the video not only changed the course of his trial, but also challenged his own beliefs about what was right and what it meant to fight for justice. In that moment, Jamal realized that he was not just fighting for his freedom, he was fighting for everyone who could not fight. With this newfound determination, he decided that he could not back down. The fight for truth and justice needed to continue, no matter what risks it might bring. It was his chance to be the voice that needed to be heard, and, even in the face of fear, he knew he was ready to face whatever came next, in search of a more just future for all. After the hearing, Jamal's life began to change in unexpected ways. The revelation of the video brought a wave of attention to the case, and he soon found himself surrounded by reporters and onlookers. The constant noise of questions, camera flashes, and curious gazes became part of his daily life. Jamal was not prepared for this new reality. He had always wanted to be heard, but now his voice echoed in a way he could not control. The first nights after the hearing were difficult. Jamal spent hours staring at the ceiling, lost in his thoughts. He remembered the expression on his father's face, a mix of pride and fear. William tried to be the support his son needed, but the pressure he felt as a police officer left him tense and distant. That night, as Jamal battled insomnia, he decided he needed to talk to his father again. "Father," Jamal began, breaking the silence that hung between them. "What do you think is going to happen now?" William sighed, as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. "Jamal, the truth is, this could become a long and difficult battle. Powerful people might try to silence you." Jamal nodded, but in his heart, he knew he could not back down. "I just want people to know what really happened. I can't let what happened to me or my friend be forgotten," he said, his voice firm. William looked into his son's eyes and saw the determination burning inside him. It was a fight that involved not only Jamal's freedom, but also the struggle for justice in a community that often felt oppressed. In the following days, Jamal began to receive messages of support from friends and even strangers. The community was divided, but many were by his side, ready to fight against the injustice he had exposed. However, the attention also brought new obstacles. He began to receive anonymous threats, messages that made him feel vulnerable and scared. One day, on his way home from school, Jamal noticed a car parked in front of his house. His heart raced. It was a reminder that the fight for truth had its consequences. One afternoon, while walking to school, Jamal was approached by a group of students. They surrounded him, some with expressions of support, others with disdain. "Do you think you're a hero now?" one of them asked challengingly. Jamal felt the weight of his peers' stares. "I just want the truth to be heard," he replied, trying to stay calm. The emotional pressure was intense, and he realized that this new life would not be easy. Conversations with his mother, who had always been a source of love and support, also began to change. She was worried about the family's safety and what Jamal's fight might mean for them. "You can't risk your life over a case. Think about us," she said one night. Jamal felt torn again. He wanted to do what was right, but her concern deeply affected him. He knew his mother was just trying to protect him, but the idea of backing down felt unbearable. Amid all the pressure and anxiety, Jamal decided to open up about his feelings. He went to the city park, a place that always brought him calm. He sat on a bench, watching the leaves of the trees sway in the wind. With each deep breath, he tried to organize his thoughts. "What do I do now?" he whispered to himself. He realized he could not carry the weight of this fight alone. He needed support, not just from family, but from the community that surrounded him. In the following days, Jamal began to get more involved with local groups fighting for social justice. He found people who shared his concerns and were willing to fight alongside him. Together, they organized meetings and discussions about the importance of transparency and police accountability. Jamal felt that by joining others, he was no longer alone. The fight for justice was not just his, it belonged to everyone who desired a better future. Through these interactions, he learned to share his experiences and listen to the stories of others. Each account strengthened his determination. He realized that despite the obstacles, there was power in unity. Jamal was willing to face whatever came, not just for himself, but for all who felt powerless in the face of injustice. And so, he began to transform, not just into a young man fighting for his freedom, but into a symbol of hope for many. Jamal's life was in turmoil. The attention he had so desired was now becoming a heavy burden to bear. The fear of retaliation, the threatening messages, and the suspicious glances from his peers left him in a constant state of anxiety. He felt as if he were on a stage, exposed and vulnerable, while the world watched his every move. However, with each passing day, he also felt a spark of courage growing within him. After a few weeks of emotional turmoil, Jamal decided he needed to confront his fears. He began attending meetings of a community group that gathered to discuss social justice issues. At first, it felt difficult to open up. The voices of others were strong and full of determination, while he felt small and insecure. But as the days went by, the welcoming atmosphere of the group began to break down his barriers. One day he decided to share his story. With a trembling but steady voice, Jamal spoke about what had happened to him and how it affected his life. He hoped that the words would flow from his mouth like a river, but they came out hesitantly, as if each one had to fight to be heard. However, when he finished, the room was silent. Then, one of the group members, an elderly woman named Clara, stood up and hugged him. "You had the courage to speak. This is more important than you realize," she said. Jamal felt a warmth in his chest, a recognition he did not expect. There, in that moment, he realized he was not alone. With the support of the group, Jamal began to feel more secure in his own skin. He learned that his voice had power and that his experiences could inspire others to rise up as well. With that came confidence. He began to participate in debates, express his opinions, and demand change. The transformation he experienced was palpable. The boy who once felt powerless now saw himself as an agent of change. However, the struggle was not easy. Jamal faced both external and internal challenges. The threats kept coming, and on some days he wondered if it was really worth it. The pressure from his family also weighed on his shoulders. His mother, concerned for his safety, often tried to convince him to back down. "You can make a difference in other ways, Jamal. Think carefully," she said, full of love and concern. These moments of doubt shook him, but Jamal began to understand that part of growing up was learning to cope with uncertainty. One night, while walking in the park, Jamal sat on his favorite bench and reflected. He realized that he had learned the difference between success and happiness. Success, until then, seemed to be only about recognition and fame. But now he understood that true wealth came from feeling secure in his own skin, from knowing he was doing the right thing, regardless of the challenges. This new perspective brought him peace. Jamal knew that the journey would not end there. Over time, he began to apply the lessons he learned from his friends in the group. He became an active advocate for youth rights in his community, organizing events and lectures to raise awareness about the importance of justice and equality. With every step he took, he felt stronger and more determined, and in the process, the friendships he cultivated along the way became a fundamental pillar of his life. He made friends from different backgrounds, each bringing a unique story and a new perspective. These unexpected bonds helped him see the world in a different way, and each friendship became a reminder that together they could face any challenge. Jamal learned the importance of empathy and solidarity. He understood that his struggle was not just for himself, but for all those who felt invisible and voiceless. This new wisdom made him grow and become more aware of his actions and how they affected others. He began to see beauty in diversity and strength in unity. Thus, Jamal's journey transformed from a solitary struggle into a vibrant community movement. He was no longer just a lost young man in his own world, but a symbol of hope and change. And looking back, he realized that every challenge faced, every tear shed, and every doubt overcome shaped him into who he was. A strong, resilient young man determined to make a difference. The night was cold and quiet, but Jamal's heart was pounding strong in his chest. He knew that this moment would come, and now he was about to face it. The lecture he had organized on social justice attracted not only supporters, but also those who had threatened him. He had received messages from groups wanting to silence him, and the idea of confronting them live terrified him. But Jamal could not back down. He had promised himself that he would fight for his voice and for the voice of all who felt invisible. The auditorium was full, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Friends and strangers gathered to hear what Jamal had to say. Among the crowd, he spotted Clara, who had always encouraged him. Her kind gaze brought some comfort, but anxiety still dominated his body. He took a deep breath, trying to find the courage he had cultivated throughout his journey. As he stepped onto the stage, Jamal felt the weight of the attention on him. The microphone felt like a burden, but also a powerful tool. He began his speech sharing his story, his struggles, and the threats he had faced. But as he spoke, he realized it was not just about him. It was about all those who also felt oppressed. He looked at the audience and saw faces reflecting pain, hope, and determination. The emotional connection filled him with strength, and his words began to flow more easily. However, at the back of the auditorium, a group of young people known for being intimidating began to make their presence felt. They laughed and whispered, trying to destabilize him. Jamal felt a chill in his stomach, but something inside him ignited. He was no longer alone. He remembered the conversations he had with his friends from the community group, the lessons about empathy, solidarity, and the strength that comes from unity. "You may try to silence me, but the truth is more powerful than any threat," he said, facing those who intimidated him. The room fell silent, and Jamal saw that some people in the audience were getting up. They began to cheer, and the sound spread like an echo of support. He felt the energy shift, and confidence grew within him. But the young people at the back were unwilling to back down. One of them, known as Raoul, stood up and began to shout, "You are nothing! No one cares about what you have to say!" The cutting words echoed in the space, and Jamal realized that this was his greatest challenge. Fear and doubt tried to invade him again, but he remembered everything he had experienced up to that point. He knew that his fight was bigger than himself. "I am someone," Jamal replied, his voice now filled with firmness. "And my story matters. I am not here just for myself, but for all those who have ever felt like you. And that is why I am willing to fight." He saw Clara and other friends standing up, ready to support him. The atmosphere transformed into a space of solidarity and strength. Jamal's words echoed louder, and the audience began to unite with him. "Together, we are stronger. Together, we can change things." The roar of support was deafening. He was fighting not only against Raoul, but against all the stigmas and fears surrounding him. The group of young people began to retreat, destabilized by the unity forming among those present. When the last word left his mouth, Jamal felt a relief and a liberation. He had overcome not only fear, but also the need for approval. He turned to the audience, where faces reflected pride and hope. That night was not just a personal victory, it was a celebration of unity and collective courage. With tears in his eyes, Jamal realized that by facing his greatest challenge, he had found his true essence. He remembered all the lessons he had learned, that success was not mediated by fear, but by the strength of being authentic and fighting for what is right. He had taken a step toward freedom, not just for himself, but for all those who felt invisible. In that moment of high tension, the friendship and support of his community solidified. Jamal knew that, although the road ahead would still be challenging, he would never face the journey alone again. The transformation he experienced was not just internal, but reflected in every person around him. The fight for justice and equality had become a shared mission, and together they were ready to face any challenge that lay ahead. After the speech, the atmosphere in the auditorium still vibrated with the energy of Jamal's struggle. People approached him, some with tears in their eyes, others with wide smiles full of gratitude. He felt that he had planted a seed of hope, but he knew that the road ahead was still long. The words he had shared were not just a release, they were a call to action, a summons for everyone to unite in search of a common purpose. Clara was one of the first to come close. She hugged him tightly, as if trying to convey all the courage he had inspired that night. "You were amazing, Jamal. Never doubt the impact you can have. You are a powerful voice," she said, her eyes shining with emotion. Jamal smiled, grateful for the support, but still felt the adrenaline from the tension he had faced. Raoul's words still echoed in his mind, but now he realized they were no longer a source of fear, but a reminder of the importance of his fight. In the days that followed, Jamal saw the repercussions of his speech spread. Social media was filled with messages of support, and many shared their own stories of struggle and overcoming. He felt honored to have touched so many lives, but also aware of the responsibility that came with it. The threats he had received did not disappear, but now they were accompanied by growing support from the community. Jamal knew this meant he could not stop. The fight was just beginning. At a community group meeting, the atmosphere was one of determination. People discussed ways to expand the social justice initiative that Jamal had started. We need to do more speeches, more meetings. We need to educate people about the importance of listening and supporting each other, suggested a voice from the audience. Jamal nodded, feeling inspired by the passion around him. He realized he now had allies, that his voice was no longer just his own, but that of all who had united around a cause. But as Jamal's visibility increased, he also became an easier target. One afternoon, as he was leaving home, he saw a group of people staring at him. His heart raced instantly. However, instead of feeling intimidated, he remembered the support he had received. Instead of backing down, he took a deep breath and walked toward the group. "If you have something to say, I'm here," Jamal said, his voice firm. To his surprise, some members of the group stepped back, while others seemed hesitant, perhaps realizing that intimidation was not a viable option. Over time, Jamal began to see changes in his own life. He felt stronger, more confident. The guilt and fear that once paralyzed him began to dissipate, replaced by the certainty that his fight was just. He grew closer to his family and friends, sharing his experiences and becoming a pillar for those who also faced difficulties. Conversations became deeper, more meaningful. He became a source of hope, something he had never imagined he would be. One night, after a long day of work, Jamal sat with Clara in a cafe. "Do you think all of this will really change anything?" he asked, looking out the window as the rain began to fall. Clara smiled and replied, "Changes don't happen overnight, Jamal. But you've already taken the first step, and you're not alone. We're all in this together." Jamal's heart warmed with her words. He realized that no matter how challenging the journey was, unity and solidarity were powerful forces. As the weeks passed, the community began to mobilize. They organized events, distributed flyers, and ran awareness campaigns. Jamal became a central figure, not only as a speaker, but as someone who listened and supported. He was building something bigger than himself. The voices that were once muted began to unite, creating an increasingly strong chorus for justice and equality. Deep down, Jamal knew that the struggle would never completely end, but he was prepared. He had learned that courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward, even when doubt tries to overwhelm him. He had found his purpose, and with it, the power to transform his life and the lives of many others. The journey was just beginning, but now he was certain he would no longer walk alone. Jamal's journey transformed him from a man marked by fear into a respected and inspiring leader. As the weeks went by, he noticed that his presence in the community was growing. People sought him out not only to hear his words, but to share their own challenges and seek advice. He became a symbol of hope, and this not only made him feel valued, but also responsible. The fight for justice and equality was no longer just his. It was a movement that pulsed in the hearts of everyone around him. With each event they organized, the community became more united. Jamal and Clara, along with other leaders, began to see real changes. The voices that had once been silenced now echoed powerfully. He remembered every tear and smile he encountered after his talk, and that motivated him to continue. But as in every story of overcoming, obstacles continued to arise. The threats he had received still loomed in the air like persistent shadows. However, instead of letting himself be disheartened, Jamal decided it was time to face those shadows head-on. On a rainy night, he gathered with his closest allies. "We need to show that we are not afraid," he said, his voice firm. "We cannot let fear paralyze us. We need to act." And that's how they began to plan a direct action. With the support of his community, Jamal decided it was time to confront those who had tried to silence him. He was not seeking revenge in the traditional sense, but rather a way to respond to hate and intimidation with courage and truth. The action was set for a large event in a local square where many would gather to celebrate diversity and hope. Jamal took the stage, his heart racing, and instead of anger, he expressed a deep desire for change. He spoke about the strength of the community, about how they were together, and that fear no longer had a place. The audience responded with applause and shouts of support. In that moment, he felt that true revenge was not in doing harm, but in rising up and uniting. The event was a success, and Jamal's message spread even further. People began to speak out against injustice and oppression in their own communities. Jamal realized that what started as a personal struggle had transformed into a wave of change. Support was growing, and with it, the determination to fight for a more just world. Looking back, Jamal reflected on how much he had grown. He learned that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward nonetheless. He understood that there, in the midst of the struggle, he had found not only his purpose, but also a deep sense of community and friendship. Now, he encouraged everyone around him to rise up and speak out as well. Jamal knew that every action mattered, and that, even though the journey was far from over, every step taken was a victory. He had become an example that overcoming is possible, and that collective struggle can transform realities. If you were touched by Jamal's story, be inspired and make a difference in your own community. Share your experiences, your struggles, and your victories. Remember, every voice matters, and together we can create a better future. Like and subscribe for more inspiring stories, because it's time to act and transform the world around us. Change begins now, and you are a part of it.